All right, here's another one that I tied years and years worth of these things back in the day, and it's still a good fly. And I know there's people out there looking for it because I get asked about it all the time. This is going to be a Renegade. So a Renegade is one of those old-timey flies that sort of can be fished any way. Dry as a nymph, you can strip it, you can fish it in a lake, you can fish it in a river. Pretty versatile fly, and it sort of makes sense in that it's got a bunch of Peacock Herl on it, and Peacock Herl is magic, so it catches lots of fish. And you can tie this on a long shank hook, or a dry fly hook, or a nymph hook, or whatever you like. Lots of variations. But I'm going to kind of tell you the dry fly version. And I'm going to start with some. This is a Tiemco 100 SPBL, which is just what I tie my dry fly stuff on. It's a great hook. It's got that little super point on it. And I'm going to start with some 14-aught Veevus in black. And I'll start this thread just a couple eye lengths behind the hook eye. And I'll make a thread base back to the bend. And when I get right to the bend, about where the point on the barb would be, had this hook had a barb, I'm going to take a piece of gold Krystal flash. I want a nice long piece. Get a hold of one here. And I'm going to tie it in right there at the bend and catch the tag end with a couple turns. And then I'm going to wrap this Krystal flash back down the bend. Now, back in the day, this was flat mylar tinsel that even in the smallest size didn't want to bend to the curvature of this hook. But Krystal flash does it just beautifully. A piece of Flashable will work here as well. You can see I wrap down the bend and back up again. I can undo a wrap and then tie it off again, so I've got everything tied on and off at the same point. And then I can nick that piece of flash out of there. So we've just got a little tag. So that's what's called a tag. For those of you that are too young to know what a tag is, that's a tag. It's just a little, what you'd call it these days is a hot spot, but that's a tag. So now we're going to put some hackle in. And I'm going to take a brown rooster feather here, and you could use saddle or neck, but this is a cape feather, and it's size to the hook, 1.5 hook gaps on a size 14, and I'm going to strip just a little bit of the base of the stem there, and then on the inside of my turn, which is going to be the side facing you, I'm going to strip just a little bit more, and this will just kind of help to set that up on its inside edge. So that's sort of what we're looking at, just a bit more. I'll exaggerate that just a bit, like so. So I'm going to tie this in by that bare stem right up to the base of that tag. And then I like to use my hackle pliers on this back here at the bend. It allows me to make these wraps very tight. So I'm going to go straight up and down with this first turn and just try to lay these wraps one right in front of the other. And this is a little tricky. In a lot of cases, you can see I'm catching some hackle there on the far side. Not too terribly worried about it. I'm going to go about 3 or 4 turns there at the bend, and then tie that feather off with a couple turns. And I can trim that out. Now, if you're tying a bunch of Renegades, save the rest of that feather because you can use that for at least a couple more flies because you're not putting a ton of hackle on it. So we've just put a few turns of hackle there at the bend. Now we're going to grab some Peacock Herl. And I just happen to have some good old-fashioned strung Peacock Herl that's nice and thick. I'm going to grab a bundle of this, get them out of the bag. Boy, this is a beautiful bunch. What I want to do is grab, I've probably got 6 or 8 here. Let's just see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think I've got 6. And I'm going to cut the tips so that they're all square. And I'm going to tie these in by their tip end up here about where I started the thread. I'll just draw those down to length. I want those butt ends behind my thread start. Then I'll wrap all the way back over these right to the base of that hackle and forward again. Then I'm going to start to wrap this Peacock Herl. And you want a fairly robust body, so I kind of let these wraps overlap a bit here toward the center. And when I get to the front, Here's a little trick. Let's see here if you can see that. See how those are starting to spread out? If you take these and kind of roll them in your fingers, you can kind of twist them back up into a cord and get that last turn on there. See how that squared the front edge of that body off? And then I'll tie that peacock off. A good clean little tie off there, just behind our index point. So we've got a nice fat little body. Now I want to wrap down over that tie off just to give me a smooth base for my white hackle that I'm about to put in. And I've got a white rooster feather, and I'm going to do the exact same thing with it that I did with the brown one at the bend. So I'm going to strip some bare stem, add a little bit more on the inside, like so. And I'm going to tie this in with the inside of the feather toward the hook, right up to the base of that peacock, and then bump my thread forward. Grab my hackle pliers again. And I want this first turn right even maybe slightly overlapping that peacock herl. And the next turn right in front of it. And again, about the same amount of turns, 3 or 4 turns on each. I'm going to pack these a little tighter together, I thinks. There we go. I'll pull that feather up and tie it off just behind the eye with a couple tight turns. Now I've got sort of a messy head here. I'm going to trim off as much of the extra as I can. You can see there's some fibers sticking out over the hook eye. I'll wet my fingers a little bit and just slide those back. I can kind of catch them as I go. I'm going to make a few turns over this as I sweep this all back. And if you got a couple that won't cooperate, that's what scissors are for. That's a little more like that. Now we're going to clean that head up, and then we'll whip finish right up there behind the eye. And trim that thread out. And that is our little Renegade. Let's give you a little more light here. Let that peacock show up a little better. We'll put a little shot of head cement on them. I like to turn them upside down. Put that head cement in just behind the eye. Try to get it all the way around. And there we've got them done. So you can kind of see this this slide's just kind of got generic features to it. That peacock body is definitely attractive. I think in lakes, I see a lot of guys fish these in lakes that I think fish probably eat it for a snail. But just a general attractor bug. And I know of more than a few guys that fish this down in little tiny sizes for midges. And you can see the advantage of that with that white hackle on the front. Makes it a little easier to see. But that's sort of a lost one, and you guys should know how to tie that. You should at least know what it is. So there's my contribution to the world today. I'm Charlie Craven, and that is a Renegade.